You'll never stay home alone again. 7 true Home Alone horror stories. Story 1. The Knocking. The first knock came at 11:14 p.m. I know the exact time because I checked my phone the moment I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my back door. Not the front door, the back. The one that faces the tree line at the edge of my property where nobody ever goes. I'm Colton, 26 years old. I work in logistics for a mid-sized shipping company out of rural Tennessee. I live alone in a 2-bedroom house that sits on about 3 acres of mostly wooded land. My nearest neighbor is almost a quarter-mile away. I had lived there for 2 years and never had a single problem. That October, my girlfriend had gone to visit her parents for a long weekend. I wasn't bothered by being alone. I actually kind of enjoyed it. Ordered a pizza, watched some football, had a beer. By 11 o'clock, I was in my bedroom scrolling through my phone, almost ready to fall asleep. Then came those 3 knocks. My first thought was that something had fallen against the door, a branch, maybe an animal. We had deer out there sometimes. I told myself that and kept scrolling, but my body didn't believe it the way my brain did. I could feel my chest tighten. My eyes weren't reading the screen anymore. They were staring at the ceiling, listening. 30 seconds passed. Nothing. I let out a slow breath. I was being ridiculous. Then it came again. 3 knocks, same rhythm, same deliberate pace, like someone counting. 1, 2, 3. I sat up in bed. My bedroom door was open. The hallway was dark. At the end of the hallway, the kitchen light I'd left on was casting a pale yellow glow across the linoleum. Through the kitchen window, I could see the back porch light was on. I always left it on at night. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera app. I had 2 exterior cameras, one in the front of the house, one mounted above the back door. I switched to the back camera feed. The image was grainy and dark. The back porch was empty. The steps leading down to the yard were empty. The yard itself faded into darkness after about 20 feet, where the tree line started. Just woods, just shadows, nothing moving. I told myself I'd imagined it. I put my phone down, reached for the lamp, started to turn it off. Knock, knock, knock. I was out of bed before I even decided to stand up. I grabbed the aluminum bat I keep in my closet, don't judge me, I live alone in the woods, and I walked to the kitchen doorway. I stood there in the dark and watched the back door. The door has a window in the upper half, 9 small panes of glass in a grid. Through them I could see the back porch light, the porch railing, the steps, and then just black beyond. There was no face in the window, no silhouette, nothing. I opened the camera app again. Still nothing on the back camera. "Who's there?" I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. No answer. I moved to the kitchen window, pressed against the wall to the side of it, and peeked out toward the porch. Empty. Then I looked at the timestamp on my camera feed. It was live. No lag, no buffering. The image showed the porch empty, porch light on, nothing there. But here's what got me. The porch light. It was on in the camera feed, yellow and bright like always. But when I looked out the kitchen window with my own eyes, the porch was dark. My back porch light wasn't on. Whatever the camera was showing me, it wasn't what was outside that door right now. I dialed 911 immediately. The dispatcher stayed with me while I moved to the front of the house, keeping low, staying away from windows. I unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the front porch, bat in hand, to wait for the deputies. They arrived in 7 minutes. They did a full walk-around of the property, checked the tree line, checked the detached garage, checked under the back porch. In the mud at the base of the back porch steps, they found footprints, fresh ones, 2 sets actually. 1 set coming from the tree line, 1 set going back. But the deputies found something else when they went back to check the camera setup. The cable that connected my back camera to the DVR inside the house had been cleanly cut. Someone had sliced through it with a knife before approaching the door. The camera feed I'd been watching, the one showing an empty porch with the porch light on, was footage on a loop
recorded footage of my empty back porch playing on repeat so I'd think I was seeing a live feed. They never figured out who it was. The footprints went into the woods and disappeared at the edge of a gravel service road about 100 yards from my property. The road connected to a county highway. No witnesses, no tire tracks, nothing on any of the neighbors' cameras because I was the only house for a quarter-mile in any direction. Whoever was out there had done their homework. They had come to my property at some point before that night, before I ever heard the first knock, and done two things. They'd identified the camera cable where it ran along the outside wall, and they'd recorded a segment of clean, empty porch footage to use as the loop. That takes planning. That takes time. They knew I had cameras. They came to prepare to deal with the cameras before I ever knew they were there. And then they came to my back door at 11 o'clock on a Friday night and knocked 3 times, slowly, deliberately, evenly spaced, like each knock was measured. The deputies couldn't tell me why. They couldn't tell me what would have happened if I had opened that door. They couldn't tell me how many times this person had been to my property before that night, walking out of the tree line and standing at my back door and watching my house before slipping back into the woods. They also couldn't tell me if this was the first time or just the first time I'd noticed. The deputy who took my statement stood on my back porch before he left and looked out at the tree line. The woods were about 100 feet away, just a dark wall beyond the range of the porch light I'd since switched back on. He stood there for a long moment looking at those trees. Then he looked at me and said, "Get motion-activated lights for the whole back of the property, and don't trust any camera that doesn't send you a live alert. A looped feed looks exactly like a live one." I moved out 2 months later. I still sleep with a bat next to my bed, and I've never once trusted a camera feed since.
I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I am not the kind of person who panics. I'm 41 years old. I've been a nurse for 15 years, and I have seen things that would make most people's hair go white. I'm calm. I'm trained. I assess situations and I respond to them without falling apart. What happened to me on a Wednesday night in February almost broke that completely. My name is Renee. I live in a split-level home in suburban Ohio, outside Columbus. My husband travels for work about 2 weeks out of every month. My kids are teenagers. My son was at a basketball tournament 2 hours away, staying overnight with his team. My daughter was spending the night at her friend's house. I had the whole evening to myself. I got home from my shift at 6:30, heated up leftover pasta, and spent the evening on the couch watching a true crime documentary, which, in hindsight, maybe didn't help my nerves. By 9 o'clock, I was tired. I went upstairs, washed my face, and got into bed. I was almost asleep when I heard the garage door. Not the grinding mechanical sound of the garage door opening, just a sound from the direction of the garage. A thump, like something hitting the door that connects the garage to the laundry room. One solid thump. I lay still and listened. Our garage is attached to the house. You enter through a door in the laundry room just off the kitchen. The garage door opener makes a very specific sound when it cycles, a long mechanical hum followed by the rattle of the chain. I didn't hear that, just the one thump. I told myself it was the water heater, which is in the garage and sometimes makes noise. I closed my eyes. Then came the second thump, and after a pause, a third. I sat up and reached for my phone on the nightstand. No notifications. I checked the Ring app, our front doorbell camera, and it showed the driveway was empty. I didn't have a garage camera. I called my husband. He was in a hotel in Minnesota. He answered on the second ring, and I told him what I was hearing. He said it was probably an animal. Raccoons had gotten into the garage before. He told me to go check and not to worry. I didn't want to go check. But I'm a nurse. I assess, I respond. I got out of bed, put on the lights in the hallway and the stairs, and went down to the kitchen. I stopped in the laundry room doorway. The laundry room light was off. Through the window in the garage door, I could see the garage was dark too. The automatic light had timed out, which meant if anyone had gone in or out recently, it would still be on. I flipped on the laundry room light and looked through the window into the garage. My car was there. My husband's workbench was there. The shelving units with sports equipment and holiday bins were there. Everything looked normal. I turned the deadbolt on the laundry room door just to make sure it was locked and went back upstairs. I was in bed maybe 10 minutes when I heard a sound that was not a thump. It was a creak. A single, slow, deliberate creak from inside the house. I know this house. I've lived here 9 years. I know every sound it makes when the heat kicks on, when the wind comes from the north, when the pipes settle. The creak I heard came from the laundry room. It was the sound of the laundry room floorboards under weight. Someone was standing in my laundry room. I did not call out. I did not make a sound. I picked up my phone and dialed 911 while I slid off the bed onto the floor and moved into my closet, pressing myself against the back wall behind the hanging clothes. I whispered to the dispatcher what was happening, gave her my address, and told her that I had reason to believe someone was inside my house. I sat in that closet for 6 minutes before I heard officers outside. 6 minutes is not a long time in most situations. In that closet, behind my hanging clothes, listening to footsteps moving through the floor below me, 6 minutes was the longest of my life. The thing that I keep coming back to, the thing that I have replayed maybe thousands of times, is the garage light. When I went downstairs and looked through the laundry room window into the garage, the automatic overhead light was off. I looked in at a dark garage and saw my car and my husband's workbench and everything in its place, and I thought, no motion. The light's off. Nothing has moved in here. He had to be standing completely still, not moving, not adjusting, not shifting his weight for at least 10 minutes before I came downstairs. Maybe more, because he heard me coming. He heard the creak of the floorboards and he stopped moving, and he waited, silent and motionless in the dark, for me to look through the window and decide the garage was empty. He was standing 3 feet from that window when I looked, and I told myself it was nothing, and went back to bed. He was standing in the dark, perfectly still, waiting for me to make the decision he needed me to make. And I almost did.
Story 3. The Repairman. My landlord is the kind of person who schedules things without telling you. I know that sounds like I'm building up to a complaint, but I'm giving you the context because I want you to understand why I didn't immediately question it when a man I didn't recognize showed up at my door with a clipboard. I'm Tanya. I'm 29. I work remotely as a graphic designer, and I live in a ground floor apartment in a mid-rise building in Phoenix. 6 units per floor, 8 floors, one of those complexes with a pool in the courtyard that nobody uses and a gym that always smells like the 1990s. It's not fancy, but it's safe. Gated parking, key fob entry, building to come. My roommate had gone home to New Mexico for her grandmother's birthday. I was home alone on a Thursday, working from my kitchen table in my pajamas. At 10 in the morning, there was a knock at my front door. I opened it and found a man standing in the hallway, mid-40s, wearing a gray polo shirt with a logo on it I didn't recognize, and dark work pants. He had a clipboard and a tool bag. He said he was there from the property management company to do an annual inspection of the HVAC units, check the filters, look at the intake vents, make sure the system was running correctly going into the summer. And here's where I did exactly what you're not supposed to do. Because my landlord had surprised me with maintenance visits before without warning, and because the man had a clipboard and a uniform and spoke with total confidence, and because it was 10 in the morning and I was barely caffeinated, I let him in. He went to the hallway closet where the HVAC intake is, opened it, shone a flashlight in, made some notes on his clipboard. He asked if we'd noticed any issues with the airflow. I said no. He nodded. Professional. Totally normal. Then he asked if he could check the bedroom vents. I said sure. I pointed down the hall. He went. I stood in the kitchen and something just shifted in my stomach. I can't explain it better than that. A physical drop in my gut like I had missed a step in the dark. I looked at the logo on the side of his bag. It was a logo for a pest control company, not HVAC. Pest control. I could see the ant silhouette in the design now that I was actually looking at it. I pulled up my landlord's number and sent a quick text. "Did you send someone today for HVAC?" I kept my voice calm. I walked to the hallway and said, "Hey, sorry, can I grab your business card real quick?" He turned around from where he was standing near my bedroom doorway. He looked at me for a second, just long, just a beat, then smiled and said his cards were in the truck. He'd grab one on the way out. That beat, that 1 second of pause before he answered. I texted my building manager directly. "Is anyone scheduled for maintenance in 3A today?" I told the man I actually needed to jump on a call, work emergency, and that maybe he could reschedule and come back when he had his card. I kept my voice light, apologetic. My heart was trying to come out of my throat. He said sure, not a problem. He'd note it in the system and be in touch. He picked up his bag. He walked to the front door. He left. I stood in the kitchen for a solid 10 seconds after I heard the front door click shut. Then I walked over and turned both deadbolts and put the chain on and pressed my back against the door like I was keeping something out. My hands were shaking. My face felt cold. I was in my pajamas. I'd let a stranger into my apartment in my pajamas and walked him to my bedroom hallway. My building manager replied 11 minutes later. No maintenance was scheduled for any unit today. I called the police. While I waited, I walked through my apartment slowly with my phone. I checked the bathroom, checked both closets, checked behind the shower curtain, checked under my bed, which is something I hadn't done since I was maybe 8 years old. I needed to confirm I was alone before I could breathe again. I was. The officers arrived and took my statement. One of them asked if I'd noticed what was in the tool bag. I said I hadn't looked. He didn't tell me why he asked until later. They reviewed the building's security footage. The man had come in through the side entrance on the parking level, which requires a key fob. He didn't have a key fob. He'd waited near the entrance until someone else came through and then walked in behind them without the resident noticing. It took him 4 tries over about 9 minutes before someone came through that door. Then he walked directly to my unit, only my unit. He didn't knock on any other doors in the building. He didn't take the elevator to other floors. He came straight to 3A. They identified him 3 weeks after from the security footage. He had prior convictions in 2 states for residential burglary. In one of those cases, a female resident had been home alone and let him in under a similar pretense, a pretend cable repair. He had restrained her while he searched the apartment. The detective who called me with the update told me that in his tool bag, they were pretty confident based on the shape and weight described by a resident who'd bumped into him in the parking lot. There was rope or zip ties, supplies for securing someone. He'd been watching the building for at least a week. He'd noted which parking spots belonged to which units and tracked when my roommate's car disappeared. He waited until she'd been gone for 2 days. Then he came in with a plausible story and a bag he could carry without anyone thinking twice. He knew how apartment buildings work. He knew residents expect maintenance. He knew that most people won't ask too many questions if you look the part. I never got a straight answer on how he intended the visit to end. That same week, I bought a door alarm for the front door and a wedge lock that braces against the floor. I put a contact sensor on my bedroom window. I also started keeping a charged external battery for my phone by my bed. The property management company apologized and installed better intercom controls. And I never, ever opened that door without asking for the company name first and calling the company directly to verify before I let anyone in. Not the number they give me, a number I find myself. My roommate jokes that I've become paranoid. I think what I've actually become is honest about how easy it is for the wrong person to walk through your door.
It was my neighbor's car that made me realize something was wrong. I want you to hold on to that detail because I almost dismissed it. Almost. I'm Preston, 38. I'm a high school history teacher in central Georgia. I own a single-story brick home on a quiet street in a small town where everybody knows everybody, or at least knows everybody's car. My wife and our dog were at her sister's place for the weekend. I had a stack of essays to grade and plans to do absolutely nothing else. Friday night, 9 o'clock. I was at the kitchen table grading papers when I noticed through the front window that my neighbor Carl's truck was parked on the street in front of my house. Now, Carl's truck is never on the street. He has a 2-car garage and a wide driveway. In 4 years of living next to each other, I have never once seen Carl park on the street. His driveway was empty right now. His garage was closed. His house was dark. He and his wife were out for the evening, I knew, because I had seen them leave earlier. His truck was just sitting there in front of my house, engine off, dark inside. I watched it for a few minutes. Couldn't make out if anyone was in it. The street lamp is halfway down the block. I figured maybe it had broken down and he'd parked it when they got back. Went back to grading. An hour later, I got up to get water. The truck was still there. Something made me walk to the front window and look more carefully. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat. Just sitting there, in the dark, in the truck parked in front of my house. I couldn't make out who it was. I couldn't tell if they were looking at my house or looking at their phone or just resting, but they were there, still, and had been for at least an hour. I texted Carl, "Hey, is someone in your truck out front?" He responded immediately, "What? No, the truck's in my garage." I looked out the window again. Carl's truck, the dark blue Chevy Silverado with the dent in the rear bumper, was parked right in front of my house with someone in it. I typed back, "Come look." 3 minutes later, Carl came out his front door in his pajamas and stopped on his porch. He stared at the truck. He walked to the end of his driveway and stared some more. Then he walked back inside and came back out with his phone to his ear. He called me. "That is not my truck." I hadn't noticed until he said it, but standing next to each other in my mind, the one in Carl's garage and the one on the street, they were very close, but not the same. Same model, different year. The dent on this one was on a different panel. Someone had parked a truck that looked almost exactly like my neighbor's truck in front of my house at 9 o'clock on a Friday night and sat inside it in the dark for over an hour. I called the police while Carl stood on his porch watching. The moment I dialed 911, I mean the literal second 911 picked up, the truck's engine turned over and pulled away, fast. Not squealing tires, not panicked, but just quick and deliberate, like someone who knew exactly when to go. Carl caught 5 of the 6 digits on the plate before it turned the corner and disappeared. The officer who responded arrived within 10 minutes. He walked my property with a flashlight, checked the side of the house, the back, the detached shed where I keep lawn equipment. Then he checked the fence gate that opens to the backyard. I always keep that gate locked. It's a wooden privacy fence 6 feet high with a combination padlock on the latch inside. The padlock was in place, shackle closed, looking exactly like I'd left it. The officer tugged on it anyway.
The latch swung open. The padlock fell into his hand. The combination dial was set to 000, the default. Someone had reset it. He explained it to me in the driveway. There's a technique for resetting certain combination padlocks. It takes about 30 seconds if you know what you're doing, but it only works when the shackle is open. Which means at some point, someone had gotten that padlock open, gone into my backyard, and then re-locked it with a new combination, a combination only they knew. My padlock was a lock to keep people out of my yard. Now it was a lock that only they could open. The question the officer couldn't answer, when? Had they done it that night while I sat at my kitchen table 10 feet from the back door, or had it been done on a previous visit days earlier, so the backyard was already theirs to enter whenever they chose? The cops traced the partial plate. It came back to a truck registered to a man 2 counties over with a history of residential burglaries going back 8 years. His pattern, what the detective described to me later, was to case a neighborhood for several nights before he ever made a move. He watched routines. He watched which cars came and went. He waited until the conditions were exactly right. They found him 6 weeks later on a different charge, shoplifting of all things, which is how a lot of these guys end up caught. During the interview, a detective brought up my address. He confirmed that he'd been watching my street for 9 days. He knew my wife's car was gone because it hadn't been in the driveway all week. He knew I had a dog because he'd seen me walk it in the mornings. He knew that when Friday came and I was still walking it alone, her absence was longer than a quick errand. He was waiting for me to go to sleep. He knew my dog was gone because he'd been watching long enough to notice I only walked one person's worth of dog each morning. My wife now refuses to take the dog anywhere without me, and I replaced every combination padlock on this property with a keyed deadbolt, every single one.
Some sounds you explain away, because explaining them away is easier than facing what they might mean. That's what I did for 4 days before the night I couldn't do it anymore. My name is Gwen. I'm 53 years old, retired from a long career in accounting, and I live alone in a 2-story colonial in Connecticut that I've owned for 22 years. My children are grown and out of state. My ex-husband is long gone. It's just me and the house. The sound started on a Monday, light, overhead, like something moving across the floor of the attic. I told myself it was squirrels. We'd had squirrels in the attic years ago. My son had dealt with them. The entry point had been sealed, or so we thought, but squirrels find ways. Tuesday, the same sounds. A little longer this time. A dragging, almost. Then silence. Wednesday, nothing. I actually relaxed. Thursday, I heard it again, and this time it was directly above my bedroom, which is at the back corner of the 2nd floor. The attic above that section is finished, not as living space, but insulated and floored, used for storage, old boxes, holiday decorations, my kids' childhood things. I went up to check. I pulled the attic access hatch in the hallway ceiling, climbed the fold downstairs, and looked around with a flashlight. Everything looked undisturbed, boxes where they'd always been, a fine layer of dust on the floor, no obvious entry points, no animal droppings. I came back down and told myself I'd been hearing the HVAC ductwork expanding. Thursday night around 2 in the morning, I woke up and lay in the dark and heard it again. Above me, directly above my bed. Something sliding. It went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. I turned on every light in the room and sat up with my phone. I didn't go to the attic. I didn't do anything. I sat there until morning. Friday, I called a pest control company. They said they could come Monday. Friday night, I made a decision. I set up my old iPad facing the hallway and opened a recording app so it would capture audio all night. I went to bed. In the morning, I played back the recording. For the first 2 hours, nothing. Settling sounds. The heat cycling. Normal. Then at 1:17 a.m., footsteps. Not small animal footsteps, not the skitter and scramble of a squirrel. Slow, measured, two-point footsteps, the sound of something walking on 2 feet across the attic floor above the hallway. They moved from the back of the attic to the front, stopped for a long time, then moved back. I called 911 from my car in the driveway. 4 officers responded. 2 went up through the attic hatch. 1 stayed with me. 1 covered the exterior. In the far back corner of the attic, behind a stack of plastic storage bins and half covered with what appeared to be an old quilt taken from one of my own storage boxes, they found a sleeping area. A folded moving blanket, a water bottle that had been refilled. There was a damp ring on the floorboard beneath it. A plastic grocery bag containing granola bar wrappers and an empty peanut butter jar. A small battery-powered lantern. Someone had been living up there. Not just hiding for a night. Living. Eating. Sleeping. Existing above my head for days. When I slept, there was a person in my attic. When I ate breakfast, there was a person in my attic. When I went up on Thursday with a flashlight and called out into the dark, there was a person, 6 feet away, maybe, less, crouched behind a wall of storage boxes, listening to me decide it was nothing. The exterior officers found the entry point, a small ventilation cover on the back of the house, about 8 feet off the ground. It had been pried from the wall and then set back into place so carefully you'd have to actually push on it to know it was loose. Behind it was a narrow crawl space that ran along the roofline and connected to the unfinished section of the attic. It was maybe 16 inches across, barely large enough for a person to squeeze sideways. They identified their suspect 11 days later. He was 27. He'd walked away from a court-mandated halfway house about 3 miles from my neighborhood a week before the sound started. He'd been sleeping rough for a few days before he found his way into my attic. He didn't say much during questioning, according to the detective who called me, but he confirmed he had been in there for approximately a week. A week. The detail I cannot let go of, the one that still wakes me up sometimes, is the dust. When I went up with my flashlight on Thursday and looked at the attic floor, I saw a layer of fine gray dust and thought it meant no one had disturbed the space in a long time. I saw undisturbed dust, and I came back down and went to bed. The officers who processed the scene showed me photographs afterwards. The storage side of the attic, the side I'd walked on, was dusty, but the back corner, the sleeping area, the 6 feet of floor between where I'd stood and where he'd been crouching, the dust in that area was marked with shoe prints, dozens of them, going back and forth, a worn path between the vent opening and the corner where he slept. He walked that path every night, directly above my bedroom, while I slept below. He knew I came up on Thursday. He heard my footsteps on the attic stairs. He heard the pull of the folding ladder, the squeak of the hatch. He heard me sweep the flashlight beam across the room and decide I was alone, and he waited until I went back down. That is the part I cannot stop thinking about. He waited.
He had a badge. That's the part I keep coming back to. He had a badge and he had a uniform, and he had a very reasonable-sounding reason to be at my door at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, and I still almost let him in. I'm Darnell, 24. I work in IT support. I live in an apartment on the 3rd floor of a building in Minneapolis. And I'm the kind of person who actually reads things. Terms of service, lease agreements, fine print. I do my research. I'm careful. None of that fully prepared me for this. My girlfriend was visiting family in Wisconsin for the weekend. I'd stayed home because I had a certification exam coming up and needed to study. Saturday was a study day. Takeout for dinner, early bedtime. Around 9, I was at my desk when there was a knock at my door. I went to look through the peephole. Outside my door was a man in what appeared to be a police uniform. Dark navy, badge on the chest, duty belt. He knocked again. "Minneapolis Police," he said. "Just doing a welfare check on this unit. We received a call about a possible disturbance." I hadn't made any disturbance. I'd been at my desk for hours. But I know how apartment buildings work. A neighbor can call about a noise complaint, and a welfare check gets dispatched. I said, "Everything's fine, no disturbance here." He said, "I understand, sir. I just need to visually confirm everything is okay. It'll only take a second." Here's where my brain started running the checklist. Real officers performing a welfare check do not ask to come inside without cause. They can ask, but they cannot compel you to open the door for a welfare check if you confirm you are fine. I knew this because I'd actually read about it once after a friend had a similar experience. I said, "Can I see your badge number and get your patrol unit number so I can verify with dispatch?" There was a pause. "Sir, I'm just here to make sure everything is badge number and unit, please," I said again. Another pause. Longer. "You can call the non-emergency line. What is your badge number?" I said again. He gave me a number. I wrote it down on a sticky note with my phone. I dialed the Minneapolis police non-emergency line right there with him outside my door. I asked them if there was an officer at my address performing a welfare check and gave them the badge number he'd provided. The dispatcher told me that badge number was not in their system. There was no welfare check dispatched to my address. There were no officers in my building. I told the dispatcher there was a man in a police uniform outside my door right now claiming to be an officer. I heard the man outside my door take a step back, then another. Then I heard the stairwell door open and close. He was gone. Police arrived in under 3 minutes. They reviewed the building's security cameras. The man had come in through the main entrance by following a resident in, just as they sometimes do. He'd gone directly to my floor. He'd knocked on 3 doors before mine. The residents of those units, when contacted later, confirmed a man in a uniform had knocked and they hadn't answered. They had knocked on 3 other doors first. The residents of those units hadn't answered. When the police contacted them later, 2 of them said they'd looked through their peepholes, seen a man in a police uniform, and decided not to answer because something felt off about it being that late on a Saturday. Their instincts were right. I almost let my logic talk me out of mine. The police identified him through the building's camera footage. He had a prior conviction in another state for impersonating a law enforcement officer. In that prior case, a woman had opened her door, confirmed she was fine, and he had forced his way inside. He had robbed her at knife point wearing the same style of uniform. He'd done this before and gotten away with it, which meant he'd refined the approach. He knew the right words. He knew how to sound like an officer conducting a routine check. He knew that most people, when they see a badge through the peephole, will open the door, because everything in our upbringing tells us that's what you do. There's something that still sits wrong with me about all of this, beyond the obvious. He came to an apartment building at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. He went through a security door he had no access to. He knocked on multiple units. His whole plan depended on finding one person who would open the door. And he was right that statistically, if he knocked enough doors, someone would. What he wasn't prepared for was someone asking him to verify. Not aggressively, not accusingly, just simply asking for a badge number and a unit, and then actually making the call. The badge number he gave me was completely invented. He said a string of digits out loud with total confidence, the way you say a phone number you've memorized. He expected me to take the number, nod, and decide it was enough. He expected me not to actually call. I called. If I hadn't, I genuinely don't know how that night would have ended. What I do know is that the prior victim he'd done this to spent 3 days in the hospital. I keep a list on my phone now. The non-emergency number for my local police precinct, my building manager's direct line, a neighbor's number. 3 people I can call to verify anything before I open my door to a stranger. I am not afraid to ask questions. Not anymore. Everything went quiet at exactly the same time. My phone lost signal, the internet went down, The smart lights in the kitchen, which I had had set to stay on until midnight, went dark, and the silence that followed wasn't just the absence of sound. It felt different, heavier, like the house was holding its breath. My name is Laurel, 31 years old. I'm a physical therapist. I live in a farmhouse about 12 miles outside of Bozeman, Montana, with my husband and our 2 cats. My husband had driven to Billings that morning for a conference. The cats were in the laundry room with their food and bed because they kept waking me up at night. I was alone in a house 12 miles from the nearest town, and the power had just gone out. This was not unusual. Montana winters bring ice storms. The power went out a few times a year. I knew where the flashlight was. I knew where the candles were. I was not afraid of the dark. I picked up my phone to use it as a flashlight. No signal. Not one bar. I have a strong signal at this house, always at least 3 bars, even during bad weather. The phone said, no service. I figured the storm, it had been snowing all day, several inches, had knocked out a cell tower in addition to the power. It happened. I found the flashlight in the kitchen drawer and lit 2 candles and told myself it was fine. Then one of the cats started crying from the laundry room. Not the usual complaining meow of a cat that wants dinner, a low, urgent sound. Both cats, actually. I could hear both of them starting up, restless. I went to the laundry room doorway and opened it a crack. They both tried to push out. I let them because the look in their eyes, I know how that sounds, but if you have cats, you know. There are different types of cat anxiety, and this wasn't the door kind. They ran to the back of the house and stopped at the hallway that leads to the spare room. They both sat there, facing the hallway with their ears back and their tails flat. I shone the flashlight down the hallway. The spare room door was open. I keep it closed. I stood at the entrance to the hallway with the flashlight aimed at that open door, and I did not move. The room beyond was just dark. A window, a bed, a dresser, shadows from the flashlight moving as my hand shook. There was a closet in that room with sliding doors. They were closed. I am going to be straight with you. I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in a way I cannot fully put into words. Not a noise or a sight, just the closed closet and the open door, and the cats, and the silence, and the fact that I had no way to call anyone. I backed up slowly to the kitchen. I put on my coat and boots. I put the flashlight in my pocket. I opened the front door and walked out to my car. My husband's car was gone. He'd taken it to Billings. I had my own car in the garage. I pressed the key fob. Nothing. The automatic garage door runs on electricity. The garage doesn't have a manual release on the inside that I could easily access in the dark. I walked down our driveway in the snow, in the dark, for a quarter mile to the county road and walked another half mile to a spot where I often got a signal on my phone. There I had 1 bar. I called my husband first. He called the sheriff's department for me because my signal kept cutting out. It took the deputies over 20 minutes to get there. They cleared the house. In the spare room closet, pushed into the back corner behind a hanging garment bag, they found a man crouched on the floor. He was wearing dark clothes and had a headlamp around his neck that was off. He had been in that house, in that closet, for an unknown period of time. He had let himself in through the basement window on the south side of the house, which had a latch that could be wiggled loose from outside. He did not have a weapon that they found. He did not have identification. He would not say anything to the deputies or later to investigators about what he intended to do. The power had not gone out from the storm. The utility company confirmed our line had been disconnected, not cut, disconnected at the junction box at the end of our driveway. Anyone with basic residential electrical systems could have done it. The cell signal loss is the part no one has ever been able to explain to my satisfaction. Investigators said it might have been the storm after all, or a tower issue that was coincidental. I don't know. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was a coincidence. But he disconnected my power. He got into my house through a window he'd identified beforehand. He hid in a closet in a room with a closed door. And when the lights went out and the phone went dark, at the moment it made that call, something in me, something that had nothing to do with logic, knew. He is not allowed to know my husband's conference schedule anymore. Neither is anyone else.